What's the most baddest thing you've accidentally said in the heat of the moment? Big burly former marine/mercenary from Iraq was back stateside. Huge mountain of a man. We came to face each other in one of the narrow corridors of the office where one of us was gonna have to turn sideways. Neither of us turned, but we stopped. I'm 6'1", 260, and he still towered over me. He was a nice guy, but still a little conditioned, I guess you could say, or mentally unhinged. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "You feeling froggy?" It truly was like something out of a movie. Without blinking I replied, "You better jump." We both cracked up and turned sideways, while the office breathed a collective sigh of relief. I'm a 4th grade teacher, and one day I was up at the board and struggling to remember how to spell a particular word. I was trying to make light of it, telling the kids that sometimes adults need help with spelling too. One student replied, "It is because you were poorly educated. But don't worry, we are poorly educated too." Double whammy. At work, project management and the cut and mismanaged a project so badly. They pushed getting minimum viable product out with the goal to roll out improvements later. Product released. They all patted themselves on the back and moved on. Then that minimum viable product broke. In a meeting we had with our directors about how it's so broken and the cost to fix it etc, no cost too big and limited manpower etc, I asked how come we couldn't afford to do it right, but we can afford to do it twice? I'll never forget the moment a family walked into the local pub I was working at while I was working. This big king of the grill, bald alpha patriarch dad type, and his wife and kids came through. I said, "Welcome. Where would you like to sit?" And he snapped back, "Well, a table would be nice." And without missing a beat at all I replied, "Actually we usually sit on the chairs here." I'll never forget the satisfaction of that moment or the look on his face, haha. My uncle's whoops about my dad, so I walked into the conversation and told them it wasn't polite to talk about people behind their backs. My uncle turned to me and said I shouldn't interrupt when the men are speaking, and completely out of character I replied, "I don't see any men in here." Boy did I get sumps that day, but that's how I knew I won that exchange. I worked in cell phone sales for a few years and a woman came in with a fairly new flip phone. This was 2018, we just still sold them. She was complaining cause one of the sides of the screen was dangling off and said she didn't do anything, it just snapped, and demanded a new phone. I told her that looks like physical damage and we don't have any coverage for that since you didn't buy a phone protection warranty. She insisted it wasn't physical damage and the phone just sucks and broke itself. She started freaking out and calling me all kinds of names and swinging her phone in my face, and then the top half of the phone literally snapped off and landed on the counter in front of me. I just looked her in the eyes and said, "Well, that was definitely physical damage." She lost her p's at my comment, and it was weirdly satisfying. I didn't realize the nature of my comment when I wrote it, but in high school, one of my teachers did end of the year anonymous evaluations. Everyone hated him, and I understood why, but I still did well in his class. I wrote, "I don't have any critiques about your teaching, but I think you should work on being a better person." Working retailer Karen once told me she hoped I die. I was so into work mode that I blankly responded, "I mean, we all die. That's not much of a threat." Maybe it was my lack of intimidation or blank stare, but that really shut her up. Forensic biology professor brings out a fresh human brain as a surprise to a stunt class. You have no idea what I had to go through to get this. The skull. When I was 12, my older sister had a boy over for Thanksgiving dinner. She dated lots of douches, but this guy took the cake. Big, brash, annoying head who was rude to her and basically everyone. As we sat down for dinner, before we were about to say what we were thankful for, he says inaudible more and grunts, "Huh, looks like I'm seated at the head of the table. Must be important," with a huge seating grin. Without pausing I gesture to my dad seated opposite him and said, "Actually my dad is at the head of the table. You're the ps." My mom scolded me for swearing at the table, but years later told me her and my dad thought it was hilarious. After 4 years in an abusive relationship and 1 year of an abusive marriage, I told my ex that I wanted a divorce. He told he that I couldn't divorce him or I'd go to hell. My response was, "Well, I guess I'll see you there." I then kicked him out of my house, for which he had never paid a dime in bills, and told him to call his mom for a plane ticket. Not the most baddest story here, but it felt good. I was around 17 or 18 and getting my first filling at the dentist. They pumped me up with nitrous oxide for pain and to help me relax during the procedure. Dentist came back and asked me, "How are you feeling?" All I said was I don't, and he lost his ps and cracked up for what seemed like 20 minutes before he could pull himself together. I also started cracking up because of the laughing gas, and his laugh was infectious. So we were both just sitting there in the room laughing, and all his assistants came by and were very confused. Lol. Not me, my daughter. This boy at school called her retarded. Her response? No, I'm autistic. I don't know what your excuse is. She was in 6th grade. I was pretty shocked when I got that phone call. She usually doesn't say things to people. I worked at Target back in college in a stocking job where we had to be there at like 4 to 5 AM to unload trucks. One morning I overslept a bit and walked to the unpacking line about 10 minutes late eating a breakfast bar. The boss stormed over and started loudly berating me in front of everyone for being late. As he was going on, I was listening and taking bites of the bar without much expression, mainly because I was so damn tired. It finally bothered him that I was disrespectfully chewing during the yelling, and he stopped mid-sentence, held out his hand, and said, "Give me that damn thing." It just happened that I only had one bite left, so I took it, handed him the wrapper, and said thanks with a mouthful of food. He paused and started laughing at the ridiculous response to his ps. We were buddies after that. Young male, traveling with a bunch of other males. Border Patrol. We were being searched for drug smuggling. Border Patrol agent. "You know I have the authority to cavity search you?" Me somehow without skipping a beat. "Sure you might, but neither of us would enjoy it, and you wouldn't find anything. Off the hook. No fingers in my butt." I'm a writer, and I do a bit of stand-up comedy. As such, people tend to introduce me to new people as a comedian, writer, etc. So I was outside a bar smoking with a friend of a friend. He then introduced to one of his friends. His friend was dressed like Liam Gallagher from Oasis and seemed to exude a bit of a cocky, sneery manner. The introduction went thusly. "Friend of friend. Mr. Gallagher, this is Writer of Wrongs. He's a comedian." Mr. Gallagher looks me up and down. Comedian A. "Does that mean you think you're funny?" Writer of Wrongs. "No, it means everyone else does." I literally do not know where it came from. I didn't think about the response. It just came out. And it is hands down the greatest thing I've ever said. I was accused of being passive aggressive. I replied, "Which part sounded passive? I don't ever want to come across as passive." At work at a company meeting, someone was presenting something cool they volunteered to work on and finished. They then explained things they thought they could do better in a self-deprecating way, and a bunch of other people started railing into his work with petty criticism. It was definitely good work, though, and a thought just hit me, so I blurted it out. "Sometimes done is the best feature." A bunch of people laughed, and then the criticism stopped. People gave him kudos and we moved on. Not really badass, but I was surprised this thought somehow came out fully formed, like it was some phrase I've been saying for decades. I guess I was just realizing how many people don't finish anything they start. So done suddenly seemed like a pretty damn good feature. Give a man some credit for finishing the damn thing. I was in an acting class in college, and we were doing a scene where a couple was having a big drawn out fight. Multiple pairs went through the scene, and I studied it pretty hard, so I knew all the lines. We are about halfway through our performance when my partner clearly forgets what a line is. And because everyone was doing that scene, they could tell she had forgotten as well. Her next line was supposed to be, "Well, I'm sorry I asked." I'm not usually a quick thinker on my feet, but I just filled the second or two of awkward silence with "I bet you're sorry you asked, huh?" And continued on with my lines. Not overly badass per se, but the class and professor loved it and all laughed. Probably the only quick-witted thing I've ever done in my life. I already posted here, but I just thought of another story. There was this one extremely attractive girl in my COMM 101 class in college. One day, for a project where we interviewed other students, I was partnered with her. We ended up not finishing our questions in class, so I asked her if I could meet her somewhere to finish interviewing her. She said yes. Fast forward to the next day, I meet her after her dance group finishes rehearsal. I knock through the last few questions, and the final one which I ask is, "What do you perceive the future to hold?" She replies, "I don't even know what I'm having for dinner tonight. I have no idea what the future holds." So I say, "Well, if you don't know what you're having for dinner, do you want to have dinner with me?" She laughed, said yes, and though we only hooked up that night, I still look back on that day as one of the best dating stories I've had yet. I worked at a bookstore and a customer asked me how often do the periodicals come out. I deadpanned periodically. And he asked to speak to my manager. Worth it. A couple months ago, my now ex-friend was telling me all the things that were wrong with me, and she finished it with, "At least I don't have to wear makeup to look pretty." I was so fed up with her, so I responded, "At least I'm capable of looking pretty." She was speechless, and I felt like such a badass, because this was the first time I ever stood up to her. Back in high school I was a slow fat kid. For pair weed, jog about a kilometers to the beach, have a swimming lesson then jog back. I was the last one back to the school grounds and the teacher was standing at the gate. He told me that cause I was too slow he was going to lock the gate and I'd have to jog to the next one 200 meters away. I said that I'd consider him locking me out of school grounds to be a suspension and just go home. He let me in straight away. Kinda wished he'd tried calling my bluff so I could have followed through and just gone home. I'm late to the party, but oh well. I work in waste management. I'm also a rather small person, like they don't make clothes at Old Navy in my size small. I was wheeling a stack of drums out to our loading dock, navigating pretty much purely on instinct since I couldn't see over or around them. Lo and behold, there's someone there chatting with the shipping people. I run straight into him. I'm surrounded by everyone in shipping, some fairly big dudes, and I feel amazingly embarrassed. I leaned around the drums to look at the guy I hit, and without even thinking, said, "That's you want me to do?" See through back quote M. Everyone burst out laughing, and the guy even opened the door to the dock for me. Every time I see him now he pretends to duck. Edit. I'm not going to grandstand about getting silver, but would just like to say it's my first one and it's a lot more exciting than I thought it would be, to be honest. Me and my girlfriend at the time were having a discussion about her going back to school. She kept putting it off every semester, and one day she got angry at me trying to get her to actually go back, not just talk about it, and she yelled Rome wasn't built in a day. And I responded, yeah, but it was built. And a decade later I still think of that. Edit. She did end up going back to school. Got her master's even. She's married now with twins. Just a real ps. Kind of a proud moment for me. I was always really shy in school, had very few friends, was bullied a lot. My mum passed away when I was 14 and I kept it to myself, not wanting sympathy or more bullying for it. Someone found out, not sure how. They then said in one of our mutual classes that I should just die like my stupid mum did. The whole class heard and was shocked. Even the teacher was like a deer in headlights. I immediately got up to leave, but before I left, I turned to her, got up close, and said, "I've seen what cancer does to people. It hurts. And I would never wish that on anyone. Not even you." And I turned and walked out. A lot of people have me some respect for the fact that I stood up to myself, although people then knew my mum had died, which wasn't great. I ended up leaving the school a few months later anyways, but I was glad that I stood up for myself. At a party a few years back, someone stole my friend's purse. Her boyfriend found the guys who took it and got it back for her, but he was still in an angry, drunken rage and was continuing to escalate the situation when he was well outnumbered. My friend finds me and says, "I'm afraid boyfriend is about to get into a fight. I need your help. Stop him, please." I stand up and I tell her, "I can't promise you I can stop him from fighting, but I can promise you I won't let him lose." Before walking off to find him. Ultimately, no fight actually broke out, and I didn't realize that I had basically said a cheesy one-liner until after the fact when my friend told me how intense that line was. I didn't mean for it to sound so dramatic. I just wanted to let her know I wouldn't let him get his ass kicked. I didn't mean to make it sound like I was about to demolish 3 guys by myself, like I'm some sort of action hero.